Hi, and welcome to the Punk CX podcast. My name is Adrian Swinsko, and I'm an advisor, best-selling author, speaker, and general explorer when it comes to customer and employee experience. I'm really interested in figuring out what it takes to build organizations that produce better outcomes for both customers and employees. So with that in mind, I seek out and interview CEOs, entrepreneurs, business and tech leaders, authors and academics to uncover some clues about what it takes to build such an organization. Now, some of you may know the podcast as the Rare Business Podcast, but I decided to rename and rebrand the podcast recently. This is for a number of reasons. First one was to mirror the title of my book Punk CX, which was published in June 2019. 2, because I'm a fan of punk music. And 3, it's just more fun, right? If this is your first time listening to one of these interviews, then hello and welcome. Please do dive into the archives at adrianswinsko.com, as I've now completed over 300 of these interviews in the last few years. If this is not your first time listening, then welcome back and thank you. So welcome to the next edition of the Punk CX podcast. With me today, I have Jason Grier, who is the Chief Customer Officer of Reputation.com, I guess. But hi, Jason, how are you doing?
Hey, Adrian, we dropped the .com, so it's just Reputation now. So so
we also got the web reference in there, I guess, as well. So it's like you know how to find them straight off the bat.
You wouldn't believe how much money we spent to have somebody tell us to drop the .com.
So, Jason, for the benefit of our listeners and also the readers of the highlights that might not be familiar with yourself and also with Reputation and the work that they do, can you give us a bit of a thumbnail sketch?
Yeah. Look, I'm pretty simple. So I lead our company's customer loyalty and growth initiatives. And so basically once after something's sold, my group owns it. I guess technically even during itself because of professional services, but we have professional services and customer success, customer loyalty, tech support, managed services, kind of the whole gamut of, managing the customer life cycle. And then, as a company, we created the reputation experience management category. I think a lot of your listeners are obviously familiar with customer feedback management, the category that's so popular in Forrester, which, as a side note, I'm really proud of our company. We were just named to the Forrester Wave, but, we're really trying to change the face of CX and really help people understand that the world of structured data now has fierce competition from the world of unstructured data, and so as a company, we really kind of combine the capability to hear both sides of data and enable CX practitioners to do something meaningful with it.
Perfect. Now we'll get into that sort of structured unstructured data sort of domain or bit, as it were, in a while. But in setting up this interview, we talked about a number of different things, and the thing I wanted to explore with you. The thing I wanted to start with is that there's a quote I think that you made, which was said, think of CX metrics as acting like a car speedometer. They indicate how fast you're going, but they don't tell you where to go. And I thought, I like that. I love analogies. So I like the idea about speedos and gauges and cars and all that sort of stuff. So can you explain what you mean by that and what is driving much of this, potentially over focusing on metrics?
I think it's just like anything else. Any company, you get into a fast car, and the first thing you want to do is see how fast it can go, right?
Right.
You get into a slow car, you still want to see how fast it can go. But, look, I think that it's critical that you have a plan. So before you go anywhere, you have a map and you know where you're going and you know how you're going to get there, or at least you have a semblance of how you're going to get there. Of course, there's going to be detours and roadblocks along the way, but if you just kind of step on the gas pedal, you're probably not going to operate as at an optimum level, right? And so I think it's just like anything else. NPS, for example, one of the first things people want to do, they want to look at the score, right? Or same with CSAT. What's my CSAT score, or even our own reputation score, which was proprietary to us. But and so how do you navigate people away from focusing on the score or the speedometer, so to speak, and really focusing on the process and focusing on just building a culture of continual improvement and building a culture of, hey, we as a group of collective people are focused on continually listening to what our customers have to say and taking action on what we hear.
I mean, do you think because I know that something somewhat alarmingly, I know that there's CEOs in Fortune 500 firms now that on analyst calls or earnings calls are starting to quote their NPS numbers. And it feels, I'm a bit like, are you kidding me? I mean, it's like, because they're all relative, but it's like, it's funny that it's one of those funny kind of things that people are quoting their NPS scores now on earnings calls. And it just makes me think, it's like, do you think there's an exaggerated focus on these numbers? Because these NPS scores are almost being used as benchmarks rather than actually people talking about sort of strategy and differentiation. And back to your point, about like, they don't tell you where to go. And many people are just driving, watching their numbers rather than actually really realizing kind of what their companies actually really knowing what they're doing and why they're doing it and where they want to go. Yeah, wouldn't it be great if you listened to some analyst calls and you had CEOs or CXOs up there talking about experiences that their customers had? It's I really think one day we'll get there. But the good news is, Adrian, it's a journey. And if you look back even 10 years ago, the thought of a CEO talking about a CSAT score or an NPS score or a reputation score on an earnings call would have been, what are you talking about, right? So progress is being made. In fact, it's so funny you bring this up. We had the CEO of actually a Fortune 500 automotive company bring up our reputation score on his earnings calls and how they look at it every single day. And so on one hand, I was like, yes, that's awesome, right? Like we're becoming a benchmark for automotive. But on the other hand, I was like, I want to make sure we're not, that they're not missing the point, and that's my fault, right? So how do you get them to focus more on customer outcomes instead of a customer score? But hey, look, it's progress, right? Yeah, I think that's right. It's on people's radar and they're trying to sort of like talk about it. But I think there's also this thing about scores and feedback and all of those things. And there's a thing that I wanted to get your opinion on, see kind of what you're seeing, is that the idea that for the longest time there's many companies, most companies, majority of companies are asking their customers for feedback and or asking them to score them and so on and so forth. And then that number quickly diminishes in terms of, are they listening? Are they kind of analyzing? Are they acting on? And then also, are they communicating back to the customers what they've done with that sort of data? The idea of how many are closing the loop. I mean, how many do you think are actually closing the loop now? I mean, doing that full cycle? Because before I saw data, this is from a few years ago, that said probably only between 5 and 10% of companies are really closing the loop. And I wanted to understand has that matured and has that number grown? I mean, what are you seeing? It's interesting. I think that it comes down to mindset. And I wrote a piece about the lost child of the world of CX is taking action. Because the good news is we live in a world now where you've kind of got this democratization of data going on. And so the reports that are sent out to the frontline managers are now kind of making their way across the entire organization. Everybody's interested in the data. What are people saying? It's hey, we added this feature. What do customers think? And so that's good. I mean, again, that's progress. But the question is, why did you make that feature in the first place? Did you make that feature in the first place because you had an inside out mentality, which is we know what's best for our customers, or do you have an outside in mentality, which is our customers know what's best for us, and we develop those features based on that? And so, the answer to your question is I don't really know. But what I do know from a data perspective, just from all the interactions that I have, is that
we're making progress, but I would say it's still early. I think people are so, just like when we talked about earlier, people are now at least talking about scores on analyst calls. At least now the data, the customer facing data and what they're saying is being democratized and socialized, across the organization. Taking action is certainly the next step. The more progressive practitioners obviously are the ones who know how to build those loops and close those loops. But I would say we're still, in the early stages of creating some scale there.
And I think the thing is, I guess you talked about the next stage of action, and then actually quantitative data doesn't necessarily tell you kind of what action to take and in what direction. That's where the insight that comes from qualitative data kind of comes into it. And it's getting that balance right, because it seems like we've gone hard on the quantitative stuff, but it's the qualitative and the unstructured stuff that's where the gold is, right?
It's all changed so much, hasn't it? If you look, it's 2021. So just go back to 2000. So 20 years ago, which in the grand scheme of things, Adrian, is not very long, right?
No.
And you look at some of these great companies, by the way, that we compete with, like a Qualtrics and a Medallia, and what really enabled them to be successful was email. Mm-hmm. Email came out, and that allowed them to enable companies to do research through surveys via email. And so awesome. But look at, and by the way, that held for a long time. But then what happened is social media got invented. And then, as that began to take hold, things like reviews came out. And so this whole new category of data popped up over the last, let's call it 7 or 8 years, that didn't really exist before, and nobody really knew what to do with. Mm-hmm. And so, all the while you've had these companies focused on the structured data from surveys, and in the background, this silent killer, so to speak, has just been creeping up. And now, the amount of unstructured data out there, outpaces the amount of structured data by a factor of 1,000, right? I mean, it's everywhere.
Right.
And if you don't account for it, then you're really not getting the whole picture.
When you talk about unstructured data, I mean, what are we talking about here? I mean, and like from where, what are we looking at? Where are we coming? Where's all this data coming from?
Yeah. So, I mean, your friends, your family, your neighbors, when they go out to eat, what do? They take a picture of their food and they'll put it on social media. And if it was a great experience, they're saying, look at this great meal that I had at, such and such. Or what if it was bad? Don't come here. Mm-hmm. So, there's an element of believability to it, number one, that makes it critical. So just social media data in and of itself, the conversations that go back and forth between, what you and I might think of as people, meaning like our friends, but they're really customers. And so, and what they're doing is giving an unfiltered, unstructured view to anybody else that wants to see it based on their experience. You've also got reviews that didn't exist up until just a few years ago. And so, now the world is focused on, we're a feedback economy, right, Adrian? And so the world is focused on what's my star rating and how do I get it to go up? Because look, I don't know about you, but I've got 5 kids and they don't do anything without reading a review. I mean, they wouldn't listen. If you gave my kids a 10-question survey, they would laugh at you.
Yeah.
They won't buy anything without reading a review. And so that's what we're talking about here, is right, this convergence of, structured data and data in the wild, and how you make a symphony out of what has become a cacophony.
And you actually you've looked into this in more detail, because you commissioned a study by Forrester to look into the sort of feedback and unstructured data, and kind of looking at that, what's happening in that sort of space, and kind of the, are people just adding on to their data lakes or data warehouses or data oceans or whatever, data planets, if you like, or are they kind of like boiling it down and getting focusing on really kind of high quality data or something? Can you tell me a bit about, that study and kind of why you commissioned it and sort of what you found out as well, because I think it's a really interesting thing, because I see lots and lots of people collecting more and more data, but almost get caught up in this paradox of choice type of thing. It's almost like we've got too much data, we can't figure out what to do.
Yeah, so we started, we kind of started the commissioning that whole thing with just the recognition that in the business world, we're really often focused on the quantitative information because that's really how we highlight achievement. And kind of the things that we just said, but kind of remembering that quality and quantity are not one and the same. And so how do you decision makers, they do have to focus on the high quality data, and that's where they're going to find the direct insights. But they also have to get it from the unstructured feedback that might make them more efficient and more targeted. And so what we ultimately found was that 84% of decision makers actually see value in the unstructured data and the customer feedback, but only 30% of the data collected was unstructured.
I mean, that makes me think kind of like, so what's the heck is going on? I mean, it's like they see the value in it, but then there's only a handful of people that are actually doing something about it, or actually the handful of data that's actually kind of collected in that way. So where's the disconnect, Jason?
I think that it's probably habit, number one.
Right.
If you're used to doing things a certain way. Look, automotive, the OEM space is does this a lot. The OEMs actually create incentives for the dealers, for example, and they tie them into to surveys.
Right.
And so they've been, really kind of cultivated over the years to focus on the survey stuff. Now we are seeing a transition to the unstructured feedback and the unstructured data, but it hasn't really changed their overall behavior because the incentives are still there to focus on the structured stuff. Mm-hmm. And by the way, that's not just automotive. You can do that literally. I mean, think of healthcare and the CAP surveys.
Yeah.
Your ability to get reimbursed from the government is dependent on you filling out a survey. And so when you're used to doing those things, number one, and then number two, you start to think about, okay, well, survey fatigue. If I send them all these surveys that I have to send, and then if I send them review requests on top of it, I'm just bothering them, right?
Sure.
Until we can get away from that.
Yeah, well, I think there's an interesting kind of like parallel. I think. I mean, I remember speaking to somebody about a piece of research that they did around CRM and how salespeople were not really. But I think that they were spending about nearly 50% of their time inputting kind of data into a system and not really getting the value out of it. So it was almost a bit like it was becoming more of a hindrance than a help, if you know what I mean. And it made me kind of think about, it's like, are the salespeople involved in the design of the product to optimize their ability to feed into the product, if you know what I mean, and to get the most out of it? And that made me think about the ideas like, do we sometimes forget, is there a possibility that we sometimes forget that these things need to be designed to maximize engagement and interaction?
Adrian, listen, I've been doing this for a while, and I still have yet to find a company that has great data. In fact, if I were to add up the amount of millions of dollars that I've heard about companies spending on master, data management projects and just kind of having to go back and fix their data. And I mean, look, it's hard. I mean, think about any company that starts anything that does exactly what you're talking about. Think about the salesperson that's selling IBM, for example, and he puts in IBM, capital I, capital B, capital M. And then that person leaves and the next salesperson comes in and puts in a new location as capital I period, capital B period, capital M period. It's still IBM, but now you've got the same company with two different data sets. And sure. I mean, that's one example, but that just happens, and it happens in every single department. And so, master data management is a thing, and which creates all kinds of problems in the structured data world, because what is the biggest problem that you have when you're sending out surveys is the right person. Am I sending this to the person that I want to be sending it to, or the person that I want to complete it? The great thing about the unstructured data is that you don't have to worry about that. The folks who are, the person who's paying the bill is the one writing the review.
Right.
And so there's a disconnect in a structured data world that the unstructured data world solves naturally.
I mean, I think that's fascinating because it's, it's also quite esoteric, I guess. I mean, so Jason, I mean, talking about structured and unstructured data and all the problems that exist within the, within structured data and then the opportunities that exist within sort of unstructured data and how we can combine the two and use them all. I mean, that all sounds great. It's all interesting. It's also a little bit esoteric. And so it'd be useful if you have a couple of examples of firms that say are, that you know of or your clients that you think are taking a really sort of considered approach to this. And if you tell us about them, what they're doing and how they're benefiting, that would be really good because it would bring this whole thing to life, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, sure. I think I live in the Southeast, and we have the good fortune to have, one of the largest, probably the largest healthcare organization, healthcare company in the Southeast as one of our clients. And this was just a couple of years ago when they came to us, and they still had a pretty archaic approach, but they're in a competitive space. Look, the world of insurance has changed a lot, and so healthcare is a lot more competitive than it has been, and they're looking at the lifetime customer value. So when they want Jason Grier to be a patient, from the time that I'm 18 till the time that I'm in the ground, and,
right.
and they want me to be not just at their hospital, but also at their minor emergency clinics, or at their orthopedic doctor clinics, or if I need therapy, at their therapy clinics. They want to keep me in their system, all those years, and so they're not just looking for me to have a great experience within their hospital walls. They're looking for me to have a great experience within their system. And if you kind of look at how they had traditionally done it, it was all focused on that old CAP survey. And, you've got a marketing department that is focused on building a brand, and you've got a patient experience department that is focused on trying to improve, their customer experience. And the two weren't really talking. And so I think what we did with them is we helped them understand the world of the structured and the unstructured data. And we kind of came up with a crawl, walk, run approach that, bolted onto their survey program because that's what they were used to doing. That's what they were comfortable doing. But we got away from the caps and we focused much more on real experience, on real patient experience. And then we started to move into the world of reviews. And at first it was just, having a reviews program. And then we got into the world of actually review requesting.
Right.
And then helping them understand that it's important to, actually respond to those reviews, positive and negative. And then kind of tangential to that, we started a social program with them where we're helping them not just post their social ads, but also help them listen to what their customers are having to say through social media. And so it was really kind of the combination of all these things that allowed them to go from literally getting, a few hundred survey responses a month to now getting several thousand surveys, several thousand reviews, and several thousand mentions on social media, and putting it all through one algorithm and spitting out, this is what your customers are saying. Here's what they like. Here's what they don't like. This is their sentiment. And then if you want to go take action, by the way, here's an integrated action tool that allows you to assign Adrian to go and do this and then close the loop when it's done. So, I think if you looked at their revenue per bed has increased. I mean, there's all types of metrics business metrics that we work with them on to help them understand the impact of this when customers do have a choice in healthcare today. And it's just done wonders for them. And we're super excited to have such a great partner in them.
And so your system is doing all the analysis and the sentiment, but also kind of pulling out some of the, if you like, the highlighting the jobs to be done for the firm, as it were, to make things better for the customers or patients. And that's kind of, it's highlighting those things, those things too. Is that right?
Yeah, Adrian, look, I've been a CX practitioner. It's a hard job. And the two hardest parts of the job, in my opinion, are aggregating all that data and then kind of, creating the data lakes out of it that says, all right, these are the trends, and all right, I'm going to take these trends that are problems and turn them into solutions. And then I'm going to go, either their quick wins or their longer term wins, which I got to go have an investment for. And so getting everybody to kind of buy in is really, really hard. After you've kind of figured out that other hard thing of what do I do with all this data? And so what we're really trying to do is be there for the practitioner. We're really trying to be kind of CX in a box for the practitioner, so that we eliminate those problems and make your life a whole lot easier to say, put all the data that you want from whatever source that you want. And we're going to, hopefully spit it out in a way that says exactly what you need to be focused on based on what your customers are telling you.
Jason, thank you for that example. That's a really interesting example. But I was kind of wanting to ask you, I mean, if I was actually to sum up the whole structured, unstructured data an improvement of experience, sort of both, which is both a challenge and an opportunity. I mean, how would you sum it up in terms of what's in front of us, in terms of the challenge we have to get over, and also, but what's the opportunity as well?
Well, I think that just like, I come from Intel or McAfee Intel. And so I'm familiar with Moore's Law. And I think that's so applicable here, because what you're seeing is this influx of listening posts that didn't exist before. And they're coming at us at warp speed. And so, my kids are using things like TikTok, and they're using Snapchat, and more and more of these tools and listening posts are being developed and growing at scale every single day. And so the question that every practitioner's got to figure out is, what are the right listening posts that I need to be paying attention to? Because nobody is going to, nobody's going to be able to listen to everything.
Sure.
So the question that you got to figure out is, what do I need to listen to? And, don't try to boil the ocean. People have to remember that statistical significance is still statistical significance. You don't have to be able to know every single detail from every single, TikTok video where somebody's talking about your product. But what you do need to know is figure out at a good level what people are saying about their experience with your brand or your product or your service, so that you can actually have a realistic picture of the experience. And by the way, go through the experience yourself. That's the other thing that in the future I think needs to continue to evolve, is that people need to experience their own experience more than they have in the past. You never see that anymore.
I think you're absolutely spot on there. I find it fascinating. If you asked, I don't mean to pick on hotels here, but if you go to, like, say, a 5-star luxury hotel, and you ask how many of the staff have actually stayed in the hotel and experienced the hotel as a guest, many of the hotels would probably say, like, oh, no, that never happens.
That's such a great point.
You know what I mean? And it's a bit like going, unless you kind of have your people experience what it is to be a customer, then how can you deliver that? So
I'll tell you a story that just actually happened yesterday.
Okay.
So my wife and I are both older, and so we're looking at possibly acquiring a sports car.
Okay.
And so
is there a correlation between age and buying sports cars?
Probably. That's probably true. So we literally went to, I'll tell you what it was, right? So it's the new Chevrolet Corvette.
Okay.
And we live in a small town outside of Charlotte, and there's a local dealership here that we went to, and the car is inside, and it's beautiful, right? And so we walk in, and we immediately get swarmed by the right people. That was great. And so the gentleman helped us. There was literally, I'm not kidding you, there was 6 of their workers right all around us.
Yeah.
And so we get in the car, we're sitting in the car, and it was a convertible. And so we said, hey, does anybody know how to put the top up? And literally nobody, it's the most expensive car they have in that whole dealer. Yep. And not one person there knew how to put the top up. And you're sitting there thinking to yourself, if the general manager saw this, they've never once been through their own experience. They couldn't have, And it happens every day, just like your hotel example, right?
And I think that's kind of fascinating. And I think you're absolutely right, sort of like, connecting those and some people call it small data, right? And it's almost their own experiential insight into what it's like to be a customer, because that will enable us to deliver better experience for our customers. Otherwise, those two things are just like separate worlds in many cases.
Yeah, it's all your behavior, right? So we talked about mindset earlier.
Yeah.
We talked about inside out versus inside, outside in, and I think what we're talking about now is behavior. And so, what are how do you as a company look at the world of customer loyalty, and what are the things that you put in place to ensure that you understand what your customers go through?
Yeah.
And more need to do it for sure.
And so if I was, so do you think that would be the best piece of advice you would give to somebody if they wanted to, say, improve their service or experience, that actually just go out and be your own customer?
I mean, it's certainly a start, isn't it? Look, I think, like we said earlier, it's always going to be, a number of things, and it has to do with your mindset, your behavior, and your investment. I mean, I think those, if you think about those three things, I always like to do things in threes. And so any company should be thinking about their mindset, their behavior, and their investment, and in anything that they do, but especially the world of customer loyalty. And so starting with going through your own experience, even if it's once every 6 months, is probably a pretty good start. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't mean that you have to go out and hire 50 people to run your CX department. What it means is that you have to figure out what a right amount of investment is to be able to pay attention to it and be able to do something about it on a regular basis. It doesn't have to be a lot, by the way.
No.
It just has to be right.
Excellent. I mean, so Jason, is there anything else you want to kind of add or kind of say before I ask you my kind of two sort of final kind of summary questions that I've been doing on a longitudinal basis since the summer of 2019?
Look, I think that, the thing that you talk about the summer of 19 and all of, 2020, I think what is so important for the CX practitioner to take away from that is that you have to be able to think about, what's important and what matters. Mm-hmm. And understanding the difference between the two and how they impact your customer's experience is critical. If you look back, what happened with 2001? 2001 changed the way that we travel, right? Mm-hmm. I'm old enough to remember what it was like to go to the airport without a security line at all.
Right.
So 2001 changed the way we travel. I would argue that 2019, 2020 will change the way that we interact, the way that we socialize. At least, we will, at a minimum, be more cautious.
Yes.
But if you are a CX practitioner in 2019 and 2020, and you didn't realize that this pandemic impacted every single person in the entire world the exact same way, and you didn't go off, the bells weren't ringing that, how does that impact customer experience at my company? Then you probably missed something, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, if you're a restaurateur and you didn't take COVID safety precautions, with your highest sense of urgency, and somebody left you a negative review because you weren't socially distancing or you weren't wiping down tables or whatever, your restaurant probably isn't in business anymore. Right? Yeah. That's how serious people take it. So understanding what's important versus what matters, I think, is critical coming out of, if you didn't learn that from 2019, 2020, then maybe maybe this podcast will help them recognize that. Perfect.
So Jason, thank you for that. And what I'm going to do is since the summer of 2019, since I published my book, kind of Punk CX, I've been asking everybody that I've spoken to kind of two sort of almost word association questions. And the first one that I ask is like, what one or two words would you use to describe a more punk approach to customer experience?
Goldilocks.
Okay. I love it. Tell me more.
I mean, you say punk, I say Goldilocks.
I'm like going, you're giving me a kind of like a children's kind of like fairy tale sort of like story sort of thing. I'm like going, not normally the thing that I would associate with punk music, but hey, I'm open. Tell me.
Well, hey, first of all, I'm a big music fan, and punk music is it's right in there, man. It's great stuff. But your book is awesome, and
Thank you.
the reason that I make the reference to Goldilocks is because what did the Three Bears teach us? It taught us it's either too little, too much, or just right.
Right.
And so if you're like in the world of punk CX, you get swallowed and consumed by yourself, like the world of punk music. Did I say that right, by the way? I hope I didn't mess that up. But
no, that's fine.
People can do the same thing in the world of CX, and so you can treat it like an also ran and invest too little, and nothing's going to change, and or you can invest too much and try to boil the ocean, and you're just going to create a bad culture. And so that Goldilocks approach is all about finding a good balance of just being responsible, to listening what your customers have to say, and taking action on what they hear, and permeating that across your entire in company, so that your employees kind of live that promise of taking care of and listening to and taking action on what they hear from customers.
Perfect. I love that story. That's great. So the final one is, what company or brand do you think epitomizes that a more sort of punk kind of ethos when it comes to experience?
Can I give you two answers to that?
Yeah, of course.
The easy one is Amazon, right? And we've all kind of had that creepy Amazon experience when you buy something, and then like the next time you go on, they have exactly what you wanted to buy, it's sitting right there. And so, I get it, but I would rather show my age a little bit. I loved, when I was a kid, one of my sports heroes was a guy named Evel Knievel. And for the younger folks listening to your podcast, Adrian, they probably had to look it up, but he was a motorcycle daredevil. He was just a daredevil in general, but he did a lot of stunts on his motorcycle where he would jump things. Like he would jump buses in Las Vegas, or one time
he'd jump canyons and things.
Yeah, that's right. He tried to jump the Snake River Canyon. But, if you look at, the amount of investment that and innovation that came out of his attempts, right? So how does motorcycle engine technology get me more torque or speed to be able to make those jumps? Or how does my, shock absorber technology change to be able to withstand the landing? How does rocket fuel impact the ability to jump the Snake River Canyon? So just a normal guy with a who had a hobby, who turned it into something kind of spectacular, actually kind of created all this innovation that helped so many people in so many different industries. I just think Evel Knievel was just kind of a cool dude. Plus he wore the USA helmet. I always thought that was really, really neat.
I think it's a great example, Jason, and I think also it also rounds off our conversation because you talked about this idea of using the car analogy, right? Where you talked about the speedometer, I think, tells you kind of how fast you're going, but it doesn't tell you where to go. But actually, what Evel Knievel kind of did, as in your example, he knew exactly where he wanted to go or what he wanted to try and achieve, and then worked backwards from there to try and figure out how to do it.
That's exactly right.
I think that's a great example.
Thank you for picking up on that, Adrian. That was really cool of you, man.
You're welcome. So, Jason, that's all I have. So I just want to sort of thank you for sharing your time and your insight and your sort of expertise with us today, and giving us some, pretty left field examples on the kind of punk questions, which I think are really kind of interesting. And, lots of analogies and lots of kind of motor vehicles in there, which is great. And, some insight into the whole structured and unstructured kind of data sort of issue, and why we should be looking more for, higher qualitative data, and then what we can do with it and what can we learn from it in order to drive for the improvement of our experience on. So that's been super cool, man. So thank you so much.
Happy to do it, man. Thanks for having me. Good luck to you.
Well, that was cool. I hope you enjoyed it. I did, and I always do actually, because I always learn something new when I speak to some of these amazing kind of people. And it's always something new that I can incorporate into my writing, speaking, workshops, and other sort of advisory work that I do. Now, if you're interested in learning about any of that sort of stuff, then you can find out more about how I work with clients over at adrianswinscoe.com. One final thing before I go, please consider heading over to iTunes or Spotify or whichever podcast platform you choose to use, and do leave a review. Every little helps, as they say. Anyway, that's all for now. Thank you for listening, and do tune in again soon. All the very best. Cheers. Bye.